Are you planning to visit Lake Louise and Moraine Lake and wondering how much time you actually need at each one? Because yes, you can visit both lakes in one day, but whether you should depends on what kind of day you want. Are you hoping to just see the views, take photos, and walk along the lake shore? Are you planning to canoe? Are you hiking to a tea house? Are you trying to fit in Larch Valley, Sentinel Pass, or Plain of Six Glaciers? Those are all very different days. So, in this episode, I'm bringing back and refreshing one of my earlier episodes because this question still comes up all the time. We're going to talk about how much time to spend at Lake Louise, how much time to spend at Moraine Lake, what you can realistically do at each lake, and when it makes sense to visit both in one day versus splitting them into two separate days. Welcome back to the Banff Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Celine Brewer, a local Canmore resident living the mountain life all year long. I help travelers like you plan unforgettable trips to Banff, Lake Louise, Moraine Lake, Jasper, and the Canadian Rockies. Today's episode is a refreshed version of one of my earlier episodes, and I wanted to bring it back because it answers one of the most common Lake Louise and Moraine Lake planning questions I get. How much time do you actually need? And I know why this question comes up so often. For most first-time visitors, Lake Louise and Moraine Lake are two of the biggest must-see places in Banff National Park. But once you start planning the actual day, it gets a little more complicated. Do you need an hour at each lake, a half day, a full day? Can you hike at one and still visit the other? Is it worth canoeing? Should you try to do both lakes on the same shuttle day? Or is that going to feel too rushed? Because I live here, I don't always have to make those same choices. I can go to Lake Louise one day and Moraine Lake another day. I can come back when the weather is better or when I feel like doing a longer hike. But I know that most travelers don't have that luxury. So my goal in this episode is not to tell you there's one perfect answer. It's to help you understand what you can actually do at each lake, how long those activities usually take, and how to build a day that matches the way you like to travel. Let's start with Lake Louise. What can you actually do at Lake Louise? Lake Louise is much more than just a quick photo stop. There's a lot to do here. Your experience can range from a peaceful stroll to a full day hiking. Now, here are the main things people do at Lake Louise. Walk the Lake Louise Lakeshore Trail. This easy walk hugs the shoreline to the back of the lake. It's about 4 kilometers out and back, mostly flat. It takes about an hour to an hour and a half, depending on how often you stop to take in the view. And believe me, you'll want to stop. Next up is the Fairview Lookout hike. If you're short on time, but still want that stunning view looking down over the lake, this is where you'll get it. It's just 2 kilometers return on this short but steep hike, but it's well worth it. It should take you about an hour. Next up, hike to the Lake Agnes Tea House, one of the most popular moderate hikes in Banff. It's around 7 kilometers round trip with 385 meters of elevation gain. It's going to take somewhere between 2 to 3.5 hours, depending on your pace, depending on how long you stay at the tea house, depending on how many pictures you stop to take. You can extend this hike to either the Little Beehive, you're going to be adding on roughly 2 kilometers, or the Big Beehive, where you're going to add on roughly 3.5 kilometers to that total. But both of those offer even better views. Either of them are well worth the extra steps for the expansive views you get. Now, one thing to know is you should probably bring some backup cash for the tea house, and there's no reservations. It's just first come, first serve. If you plan to add on the Little Beehive or the Big Beehive, you're going to be looking at 4 to 5 hours total for that hike. Now, one of my favorites, the Plain of Six Glaciers Tea House hike. This one is a bit longer. It's about twice the distance, so it's around 14.5 kilometers round trip with 590 meters elevation gain. It usually takes around 5 to 6 hours. It's less crowded than Lake Agnes. It offers incredible glacier views. Plus, you get fantastic views back over Lake Louise, and you get to end with that easy lakeshore as part of your hike. You'll also find a tea house there, so make sure you have some backup cash, because really, who doesn't love a slice of cake partway through a hike? I don't know about you, but I will always hike for cake. Now, if you're having trouble choosing between those two tea house hikes, head to episode 59 where I get into the details of both of them. For those of you not interested in hiking, you can do afternoon tea at the Fairmont Chateau Lake Louise. A fantastic experience if you're not hiking. Now, reservations are required and should be made well in advance. Another non-hiking option is canoeing on Lake Louise. Obviously a bucket list experience, though it can be pretty busy. Canoe rentals operate late May or early June, typically until early to mid-October. Again, weather dependent. They cost $180 per hour this year, and the bookings are first come, first serve. Now, just know if you're a guest at the Fairmont, you get your own shorter line. I would plan for obviously an hour if you're going to canoe for an hour, and any extra time that you're going to be waiting in line for that option. Horseback riding is another option at Lake Louise. Brewster Adventures offers guided rides to Lake Agnes or Plaintiff Six Glaciers. Now, those obviously need to be booked in advance. You're looking at about 3 hours for Lake Agnes. Plaintiff Six Glaciers is around 4 hours, or you can just do one to the end of the lake, which is roughly 1.5 hours. Now, of course, there are several other hikes you can do at Lake Louise as well. The ones I've listed are the most popular ones and the ones first-time visitors tend to do. However, if you're looking for something away from those tea houses and off the beaten track, I'll link my Lake Louise hikes in the show notes. So, given all that, how much time do you need at Lake Louise? If you're just doing the Lakeshore Trail and soaking in the view, you might spend 1 to 2 hours. If you're hiking or doing tea or a canoe ride, I would plan to spend either half a day to a full day just at Lake Louise. Obviously, this is going to depend on which hikes you choose and if you're going to add on anything else to that hike, like a canoe ride or even that afternoon tea. Now, one of the most important tips, though you can still drive and park at the Lake Louise Lakeshore lot, you will need to go very early and be very lucky to get parking. And you can't connect to Moraine Lake from there with a few exceptions. Like if you're staying at the Fairmont and you use their shuttle or the Parks Canada shuttle from there, or you're staying at nearby Paradise Lodge and you're using the Parks Canada shuttle, or you book the Parks Canada Alpine Start. So those are the 3 exceptions. But just know that aside from those, you are going to likely need to be there before sunrise to get parking. And even then, I expect it to be even busier this year. During the summer, so mid-May to early October, paid parking is in effect, and it is $42 this year. That $42 is regardless of how much time you spend at the lake. Again, that lot fills up early. I would expect to need to be there before sunrise in peak season. Now, if you want to see both lakes in one day, driving to the lakeshore is not the best option. If you're just visiting Lake Louise and want to get an early start, then you may choose to drive. If you've booked a Parks Canada shuttle, then you don't have to worry about how long you take at Lake Louise. You just get in line for the Lake Connector shuttle when you're ready to head to Moraine Lake. Just don't miss that last return shuttle to get back to your car at the Park and Ride at the Lake Louise Ski Resort, which is at 7:30 p.m. Now, I said that if you want to see both lakes in one day, driving to the lakeshore is really not the best option. Now, that is because you're already going to be planning a shuttle to Moraine Lake. You might as well find a shuttle that works for both options if you're going to do that in the same day. So let's talk a little bit about Moraine Lake and what you can do there. As you likely know, Moraine Lake is even more restricted this year. You cannot drive there at all unless you're staying at the Moraine Lake Lodge. New this year is that even if you have an accessible parking tag, you still cannot drive there. Everyone has to book a shuttle or take a guided tour. Obviously, biking up the road is an option as well, but for today, we'll focus on shuttles or guided tours. Now, Moraine Lake is similar to Lake Louise in what there is to do there. There's the Rockpile Trail. It's short, but iconic. It's just around 0.8 kilometers round trip. It's a set of stairs. It'll take you about 15 to 30 minutes, depending on how long you stare at those glacier-fed blue waters. Moraine Lake also has its own lakeshore trail. Now, it's often confused with just the rock pile, but you don't take the rock pile to get to Moraine Lake Lakeshore. You don't take the lakeshore to get to the rock pile. You connect to them in different spots. So the Moraine Lake Lakeshore Trail is a scenic path that continues along the shores of Moraine Lake for about 4 kilometers round trip. It's relatively flat. Plan for about an hour to an hour and a half, and take your time. Now you're going to start this one next to the lake, not along the same path that you take to go up to the rock pile. Don't worry, both are very obvious when you get there, but just know that they're 2 different directions. The rock pile trail starts on your left once you pass all of the toilets. And if you want to get to the Lakeshore Trail, you just keep walking towards the lake. Again, it's signed. You'll figure it out. It's not that difficult. Now, the other thing is canoeing on Moraine Lake. Canoes, similar to at Lake Louise, are first come, first served, no reservations. Now, the rentals there are about $160 per canoe per hour, and you can expect some long lines in peak season, similar to Lake Louise. For those of you that want to hike, you can hike to Constellation Lakes. It's a great family-friendly trail. It's around 6 kilometers round trip with 240 meters elevation gain. It should take you around 1.5 to 2 hours. Another one that you've probably heard of is hiking to Larch Valley or Sentinel Pass, which is an extension to Larch Valley. It is one of Banff's most beloved hikes in Larch hiking season. It's around 8.5 kilometers out and back to Larch Valley with around 535 meters of elevation gain. Now that increases to around 11.5 kilometers round trip with 820 meters elevation gain when you add on Sentinel Pass, which I highly recommend you do. If you need to take a little bit of a break at the Minnesota Lakes up there, do that and then head up to Sentinel Pass. The views are amazing. You're going to want to plan somewhere between 4 and 5 hours for this hike. Again, more or less depending on how fast you are, how many times you stop, that kind of stuff. Obviously, Sentinel Pass adds more challenge and more time, but the views are amazing. For a quieter alpine adventure, Eiffel Lake is around 12 kilometers round trip, and Wangchemna Pass adds on another 6 kilometers round trip. So that makes for a very long day if you go all the way to Wangchemna Pass. You're looking at around 18 kilometers round trip. I would plan for up to 5 to 6 hours for Eiffel Lake, and even more if you add on Wangchemna Pass. So, how much time do you need? If you just want to walk the lakeshore and do the rock pile, 1 to 2 hours is going to probably be enough. But if you want to do that plus canoe or do a hike, then I would plan for a half day to a full day there too. Now back to that big question. Can you do both lakes in one day? Yes, it is entirely possible to do both lakes in one day. If you're just planning to visit each lake, walk the shorelines, maybe take a few photos, then you absolutely can do it. This works best if you, book a Parks Canada shuttle that includes that lake connector ticket between them. And there are plenty of other shuttles that will stop at both lakes and give you 1.5 to 2 hours at each lake. I'll link to some of the best options for this in the show notes. If you're planning just one big hike, then you can still fit them both in. For example, you could do Moraine Lake at sunrise, then visit Lake Louise to hike to one of the tea houses. Or you could start at Lake Louise and do your big hike first, and then visit Moraine Lake in the afternoon, enjoying a leisurely walk along the lakeshore or just up to the rock pile. If you're planning a big hike and canoe rentals at both lakes, then I recommend splitting them into 2 separate days so you're not rushing or stuck watching the clock. You can actually just take your time, take in those views, and enjoy your hike. Now, one thing to keep in mind, weather and smoke can be unpredictable. Make sure you're well prepared for a full day out in mountain weather. And remember that in the summer, our days are nice and long. So even if you catch that last shuttle back, if you're with Parks Canada at 7:30, it's still going to be daylight out at that time. So you really can get out and enjoy a long day at both of these 2 iconic Banff lakes. So my biggest local planning tip is this. Don't start by asking, can I fit both lakes into one day? Start by asking, what kind of day do I actually want? If you want a sightseeing day, then yes, Lake Louise and Moraine Lake can absolutely work together. It makes a lot of sense. You're going to be booking a shuttle for Moraine Lake anyways. You're going to be heading out in that direction. Maybe you're going to walk the lakeshore trails. You're going to do the rock pile at Moraine Lake, take your photos, enjoy the views. Keep that day simple. If you want to hike to Lake Agnes, the Big Beehive, or the Plain of Six Glaciers, obviously you want to give Lake Louise more time in your itinerary. If Moraine Lake is your biggest bucket list stop and you want to hike Larch Valley, Sentinel Pass, or even all the way to Wangchemna Pass, then let Moraine Lake be the focus of the day. Maybe for those big hikes, you want to plan just one lake each day. Now, if you're trying to fit in canoeing, a big hike at each lake, getting in all your pictures, it may be your sign to split your lakes into 2 separate days if your itinerary allows. Lake Louise and Moraine Lake are both incredible, but I would give yourself enough time to actually enjoy them. And hiking is a great way to do that. You will get some spectacular views. Now, before we wrap up, my top 3 takeaways from this episode for you are: number 1, Lake Louise and Moraine Lake can each be a quick stop, a half-day visit, or a full-day experience. It all depends on whether you're just taking in the view, doing an easy walk, canoeing, or planning one of the bigger hikes. Number 2, yes, you can visit both lakes in one day, but choose your version of that day carefully. A simple sightseeing day works well. One big hike plus a shorter lake visit can also work. So a big hike at Lake Louise and then just a shorter visit at Moraine Lake. But trying to do everything at both lakes is going to be too rushed. You'll never fit it all in. Number 3, transportation is going to affect your timing. Whether you try to drive to Lake Louise, or you book Parks Canada shuttles, or you take Rome Transit, or you've booked with a commercial shuttle operator, make sure your transportation plan actually matches the day you want. I have seen far too many people come back and say that they booked a shuttle that only gave them 1.5 hours to 2 hours at the lakes, and they really had wanted more. So make sure you know what you're getting. You also need to account for waiting in line. If you're doing Parks Canada shuttles, you're going to be waiting in line to catch that Lake Connector shuttle and then waiting in line for shuttles back to the park and ride where you parked your car. So keep all of those extras in mind. And then remember that parking at Lake Louise is going to be very difficult to get. And you cannot get to Moraine Lake without a shuttle. Obvious exceptions if you have an e-bike and you plan on getting there that way. Now, if you're listening to this and thinking, okay, I know what I want to do, but I still don't know how to make Lake Louise, Moraine Lake fit with the rest of my Banff itinerary, just know that I do now offer 15-minute itinerary reviews where we can help fit that in. So that might be an option if you have most of your itinerary already planned, but you just are struggling with 1 or 2 pieces of it. And if you do end up booking a commercial shuttle or tour, don't forget to check my Banff discounts page. I have discounts for several shuttles and experiences, so it's worth checking those before you book. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Banff Travel Podcast. If you found this helpful, make sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss the next one. I also appreciate any reviews or feedback on the podcast. If you have feedback, you can head to banfftravelplanning.com/podcast and send it to me. Until next time, happy trip planning, and I'll see you out on the trails.